Hi everyone, and welcome to Cloud on Air, live webinars from Google Cloud that we host every Tuesday. Just a reminder, you can ask questions on the platform at any point. We have Googlers standing by to answer them. So let's get started. Hi, I'm Alicia Paterson. I'm a program delivery consultant with Apogee, which is part of Google Cloud, and I get to work with big brands across the planet and help them leverage APIs to deliver impact in their businesses. Our webcast today is being co-presented with Walgreens. I'm delighted to be joined today by Erin Neus-Cheong, who's the Director for Core Digital Products and Innovation at Walgreens. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Alicia.
So today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what it means to build API products, and then Erin's going to talk about how Walgreens has been able to use APIs to extend their assets into developer ecosystems, and then that'll be followed by responding to your questions. So let's jump into it. So what do we mean when we talk about APIs as products, and how can productizing APIs provide opportunities for business? This can be a difficult concept for product people to get their head around, as at best APIs are seen as points of technical integration, and as at worst, IT jargon. I have a simple example from the insurance business that I find product professionals can often relate to, and it helps illustrate the ability for APIs to extend into new channels of opportunity while also extending a better customer experience. So no one really enjoys shopping for insurance. It's one of those kind of necessary things that we have in our lives. Insurance companies have a tough time creating a great customer experience because the times you typically engage with an insurance company is when you have to pay them a bunch of money to buy insurance, or when you make a claim because something that you hoped wouldn't happen just happened. So I was thinking about this recently because I bought a drone, like an unmanned aerial vehicle, and I was concerned that it might fall out of the sky from time to time and land on something expensive, so I went shopping for insurance. And I found this product offered by a large multinational insurance company, and they make the product available through their traditional high commission agent network as well as directly online. It was like $800 for $1 million of coverage that lasted a year. I thought it was a bit pricey for me, probably a bit pricey too for more than the 500,000 people that bought consumer drones in the US last year. And then I found a mobile app, more of a niche insurance offering. When you launch this app, it draws a map, drops a pin where you are, and says if you want to fly your drone for the next hour, anywhere in that radius, then it costs like $20 or something for $1 million of coverage, which was a much better offering for a casual flyer. And that made me think, the insurance company's core business is assessing and underwriting risk and putting a price on that, and obviously having a margin where they make their business. Had they been API first and productized to the API, it would have allowed them to extend their core business to power this app, the one that I found, and indeed many others like it. What's more, if they had APIs to quote and sell their drone insurance, they could give it to drone manufacturers who then could build it directly into their product experience. When you use the app or whatever tool you use to control your drone, one of the options might include purchasing insurance for that flight. And surely there's no better experience than not having to worry about going and getting insurance before you can go flying with your drone. Instead, you can just fly your drone with the peace of mind that you can purchase insurance for that particular flight if you need to. And then it also occurred to me that the insurance company today uses obviously a lot of data to inform its risk assessment and pricing. However, typically the only data it's able to collect when running its business is when someone buys a policy or when they make a claim. Whereas if they were to productize to the API and serve applications like the one that I found, then they could also have visibility of how often people fly their drones and where they fly their drones and for how long, data that could significantly enrich their ability to assess that insurance risk. Productizing the API, creating an API to quote and sell drone insurance, and then offering it to an external ecosystem of app developers and drone manufacturers would not only extend their product to a much greater reach, it would also give them richer data with which to make their underwriting assessment. Not to mention they could also use those APIs then to power their traditional agent network and their website. So what does productizing an API mean? There are many aspects that we might talk about, but for this webcast, we're just going to focus on these three items. So outside in means developing a strong focus on the external business or user need and making sure your organization connects that perspective directly to development work. We'll talk more on that in a moment. Speed to market recognizes the cost of software and supporting infrastructure is lower now than it ever has been before, thanks to growth in cloud driving down infrastructure costs, software frameworks with built-in foundations that speed development, and open source platforms allow for maximum collaboration. Because of this, the manner in which software is built needs to change to modern, agile practices with a strong focus on removing obstacles to fast delivery. Now, digital products are never really finished, right? Because there's always some new technology or new device that your customers expect to engage you across. Iterative delivery asks that you take an iterative product delivery approach to your APIs, that you have a product backlog, you make regular ongoing improvements to them over time, the same as you would for your website or your mobile apps or indeed any other product that you might own. So each of these we can break down into further supporting ideas, a couple of which I'll talk about now, but also much is covered in our complete guide to API products ebook, which is the link for which we'll provide a little bit later on this webcast. So let's look more closely at outside in. Outside in is a mindset, right? It's a design philosophy supported by organizational constructs such as team and role definitions and software development methodologies. It moves the problem domain from an IT question of exposing data or other assets instead to the question of how that data will be used from a consumption perspective. Traditionally, IT teams think about APIs from an exposure point of view. We can just expose a service and be finished. This brings with it a risk of surfacing complexity, since the people who build solutions on your back-end systems are close to those systems and grounded in their idiosyncrasies. If your API development team consists of just your back-end developers, then you run the risk of exposing your complexity with your data, whether it be complicated call-outs to disparate services or an assumed understanding of the underlying data architecture. Exposing complexity creates friction for the developers who will consume your APIs, slowing down their adoption and their ability to build solutions on top of your assets. However, thinking about it from the end user's point of view leads to better results for the business. Apogee's most successful customers start from the user, thinking about what the user's experience will be like and working backwards from there. Providing the application developer with great APIs reduces the complexity they face in creating new applications. The application developer is free to focus on user experience and iterate on a few different designs. The API team makes this possible by providing easy-to-use APIs with consistent interfaces and security patterns. The API team builds an API facade on the existing services based on an understanding of the application developer's needs and abstracting away the complexities. One way to ensure that you bring an outside-in perspective to development is to make sure that your development team includes a product owner, ideally a product manager for the API, or the relevant product owner for that business area, someone who is close to the needs of the users and the app developers that are creating software for them. So packaging up an API as a product means considering the outside-in design and making it easy for those consuming developers to find and use your APIs to solve the software problems that they face, helping them with things like great documentation that makes it clear what the API does and how it might be used. Like with e-commerce, your goal is to make the experience as frictionless as possible, remove barriers to discovery and adoption by your app developers. In the same way an online retailer seeks to remove unnecessary clicks between a customer's purchase decision and their checkout, in the API product world, you should be looking to minimize the time it takes for your app developers to get to their first hello world, right? Their first use of your APIs. So what does an API product experience look like? I have a conceptual model that presents a metaphor, if you like, for the API product experience from an app developer's perspective. So for this metaphor, I want you to imagine that your 8-year-old niece it's her birthday and she's asked you for a Lego castle. So you go down to the Lego store. When you walk in, you see rows of Lego boxes on shelves. Like the whole catalog is on display, making it really easy for you to quickly find the box that has a picture of a castle on it. That looks like the kind of thing you think she might enjoy. When you look at the box, you see that it says ages 6 to 65, like it describes the target audience, right, for the product. It has pictures in the box of what the completed set will look like. In fact, there are pictures of other things you can use the contents to build. They're like other use cases for the contents of the box. You're pretty sure it's what you'll want, but you're even more sure when you see a glass case on display nearby where one has been assembled already. You can look at that one. It's like a reference implementation for the product. So confident it's exactly what you'll love. You can buy it. You're out of the store within 5 minutes, knowing that you've solved the problem that you have. Now imagine that experience built by someone close to the back end that might take an exposure approach, like an inside-out approach. In that case, when you go down to the Lego store, but you can't walk straight in, of course, because you need to first have an NDA and contract signed to let you come into the store. And then once you can come into the store, rather than seeing rows of products on shelves, you see buckets and buckets of all different types of Lego in all different types of color. All the complexity is on display here. And now it's your job to figure out how you're going to assemble all those pieces together to make a castle. You've got no choice but to go and ask someone for help. And they say, yeah, get 1,000 of the gray bricks and 1,000 of the brown bricks, whatever else. And you're in there for ages. And when you walk out, you have this big bag of all this Lego, and you're still not even sure how it's going to come together to create the thing that you need to give to your niece, in spite of spending ages and ages in the store. So an outside-in perspective would have seen that a store full of buckets of bricks is too complex for folks looking to buy a gift for their child. As with APIs, to create a great product, it is important to bring the outside-in perspective to the development team. So one organization that's been able to do this with great result is Walgreens. And Erin is here today to tell us a little bit about that journey.
Thanks, Alicia. So as you're probably aware, Walgreens is a very large and very diverse organization, and within the company we have a lot of different businesses operating independently within the overall corporation. So my team, the core digital products team, our mission is to create and scale and operate the products and features that aren't aligned to any one specific business, but those that sort of support and add value across all of our businesses. And one very important component of my team is our third-party API program, which is what I'm excited to talk to you about today. So I've been in my current role for just a few months now, and but I've been with Walgreens for almost 7 years now. So I was there back in 2012 when we launched our very first API. And I remember it seemed very novel at the time. So I was reading a tech blog and there was a headline that said, the apocalypse is upon us, Walgreens has an API. So it might not have always seemed obvious from the outside, but really from inside the organization, the conditions were really right for us to embark on this journey. And there are, I think, 3 key things that really set us up for success to do that. So the first thing is that we had a really strong foundational digital strategy and mobile strategy that we're building off of toward an API program. Secondly, we had the right mindset within the organization to sort of embrace disruption and think about new and better ways of doing things. And third, we were in a stage of maturity within e-commerce where we were really developing and building out the product management discipline fundamentally. So the timing was really great.
Right.
And let me just walk in a little bit more detail through kind of each of those with you here. So the first is our API program strategy. So at the time we had some very, very innovative first to market type digital solutions that we had come up with, like the ability to scan your pill bottle and automatically refill your prescription that way, and the ability to, excuse me, print photos directly from your camera roll directly into the Walgreens store. And we came up with these ideas and opportunities really by just reimagining those sort of core central value proposition elements that we had in our retail locations and thought about how they would manifest as a great digital experience.
Right.
And then beyond building out those capabilities, just due to the nature of the features that we had built, we really had to connect them from the very beginning into our physical locations. So we had a really rich and robust omnichannel experience from very early on. And this was extremely powerful for us, as you can imagine, and kind of beyond just connecting our own digital experiences, our leadership in e-commerce at the time realized that it could be even more powerful if we could kind of unlock those core capabilities to an even wider audience by connecting to this broader developer ecosystem. So the second piece that I think was really critical for us was having a business that was sort of the right opportunity to pursue this type of innovation. And so we did have a business. Photo at the time was going through massive transformation. If you're thinking back to then, it had very quickly gone from a state where people were developing rolls of film from cameras to doing digital photography, and very quickly then even right through that into taking all of your photos straight from your smartphone.
Right.
And coupled with the smartphone photography was this development of hundreds, if not thousands, of different sort of photo taking and editing and collage apps that were happening. And then the output of that being so easy to just with one click share to social media. Right. So that was your entire experience from capture through editing to sharing, and it sort of had elbowed out this need to print a physical product, which had been the focal point of taking photos, not in the not too distant past. And so we were kind of looking for ways to kind of solve that riddle. And I get a ton of credit to the head of our photo business at that time, is that he really understood and appreciated that this change wasn't necessarily a problem for us. It was actually a really big opportunity, and he embraced that. And was really, really excited to see what a program like this could do. And honestly, right now, I think that almost every industry is being disrupted in this kind of way. So it'd be hard to even think of a business that this kind of solution couldn't be appropriate for. So the third piece for us, again, was the fact that we were really building out this product management discipline and way of thinking within the organization. And we kind of looked at everything as, how do we manage this thing in a product way? And I've been in product for a very, very long time, and I'm accustomed to identifying opportunities as the things that form the intersection of the features that would specifically drive value for the business and the things that the customer value is coming from. And what I think is really interesting about managing APIs as products is that it layers on this third dimension, which is the things that drive value for the developer. And in fact, it's really different because the value, we're used to driving value for the customer, but the value that you drive for the customer is actually indirect. And so you spend your time just thinking about what the possibilities could be for that opportunity, and then making the best possible product that meets the needs of the developer to unlock that and kind of manage that customer experience.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's the outside in that you were talking about earlier.
Of course, yeah.
So the example that you see here, we thought about what our problem statement was, which is, how do we re-engage these smartphone users with photo printing? And we looked at our business value component, which is we need to increase revenue from photo services. We need to get people printing again. And what we thought the customers wanted, which was a fun and simple way to keep doing those things that they were really enjoying, but to potentially layer on a very easy way to have sort of a physical component of output from what they had created that captures not just what they took the photo of in the first place, but the experience of actually creating and having this sort of social environment in which they were using their photos. And so then we really thought about the fact that we needed that partnership with the developers, because that's where the customers were. And we realized that this could work because we had a lot of value that we could offer to the developer community. And so we embarked on our very first API. And as it turned out, this formula that we had, which was the right strategy, the right mindset, and the product management approach, really worked for us. And because we had created this great product with the outcome in mind, it was easy to use, it had a great feature set, there was an opportunity for earning revenue from the developers, which was actually pretty rare back then, and the marketing opportunities that came from a partnership with the Walgreens brand, we had tons of interest in the program. And in fact, just in terms of scale, we actually have had over 200 integrations just for our photo printing API since we launched it.
That's a great result.
And we've seen a ton of benefits from this API in the program in general. Specifically here, there was a significant amount of direct revenue that started coming from this channel, and still to this day is actually driving measurable impact and influencing bringing photo back to being a growth business for us again.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And secondly, we have found that the developer community is very good at identifying new ways and opportunities to attract customers back into wanting to print, which is great. And they're doing this because we're giving them these great tools and the flexibility to problem solve on their own without having the ideas have to come from us. And then, finally, I think that this kind of partnership has really helped the industry as a whole to become more innovative. And some of the innovation that's come out of that, we've actually been able to kind of repurpose and bring into our own digital assets as well. So one more comment on this, honestly, I'm telling the story now as the perspective of being leader of the team that includes the API program, but back then I was not that. I wasn't a mobile product person. I wasn't an API product person. I was the photo product person. And so it was really difficult for me to kind of give up that control of my customer that I had guarded so carefully to completely external parties who were actually defining parts of the customer journey. But at the same time, it was actually really liberating because there were things that I couldn't do that maybe I would have wanted to do. And I couldn't because of brand constraints or because of resource constraints or because of technology constraints. And a lot of these partners that we had didn't have the same constraints. And it was really excited to kind of see what they could do with that freedom. And really at the end of the day, regardless of where the customer journey started, at the end of it, they were walking into a Walgreens store, and so they were getting a really important part of our customer journey that was owned by us.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So over the past 5+ years, we've continued to build out our portfolio of API products, and we've continued to kind of identify opportunities to extend those core central capabilities of Walgreens, particularly in areas of transition or disruption, in a way that's enticing to the developer community. So today we have this whole portfolio of API products that we manage. For photo, we didn't stop with prints. So almost immediately after we launched the printing API, our developer partners started approaching us with ideas for other types of products that they'd like to be able to create, like greeting cards, posters, canvases, photo books. And this was really great because our organizational expertise within Walgreens was not necessarily creating mobile photo product builders. And we were really excited because we had these products that we could create. We couldn't always get to them, but we could actually let our partners be the ones to focus on things like building the best mobile photo collage creator. And they were able to actually launch those products before we could launch it in our own mobile app. So after photo, we moved on into the pharmacy space. Obviously, this is kind of big and central to our business. So we initially went out with a prescription refill and transfer API. And obviously anything that has to do with pharmacy and Walgreens, the scale and the reach is so great that it's a very appealing partnership for any of our potential partners. And specifically, our large healthcare provider partners are motivated to try to drive patients to take their medications in a timely fashion, for example. So any way they can sort of reduce friction in the process of getting the recommended prescription into a Walgreens store to be filled without any of those drop-off points that it would require from actually physically making someone go to a separate experience. And so this is huge interest in that program. Beyond that, other aspects of healthcare as well, beyond just prescriptions. We went through a period where we sort of kicked off a tremendous healthcare innovation program, which has continued on to this day. One aspect of that was really partnering potentially with fitness device tracking companies.
Right.
And so looking for ways to kind of engage in healthcare and wellness outside of just the medications, this is a great opportunity. So we actually launched what we call our Balanced Rewards for Healthy Choices API, which means that a customer can actually sync up and integrate their fitness device with this API and automatically be rewarded with our loyalty program points, which they can then apply toward rewards within the company.
That's really cool.
Which is really exciting. So moving beyond that, most recently we've been spending a lot of time working on shopping and couponing experiences. And so just kind of going back to the mindset component, retail, shopping, deal seeking is shifting a lot right now in terms of the way customers approach it. And they're definitely in most cases not coming straight to Walgreens.com to do all of that research. And so we need to find new ways to kind of get our experiences out there where customers are searching and shopping and deal seeking to kind of bring them back into our network. And so a couple of things that we have, number one is there's a digital offers API, which enables us to showcase personalized offers for customers, which they can then clip to their loyalty account and have that coupon automatically be applied at checkout. We also have an add to cart API, so we're able to actually transfer a product directly from any product experience into a Walgreens.com cart for fulfillment by our business. So thinking a lot more there, we do have a few more really exciting things coming, so definitely stay tuned. And I just wanted to add, as we kind of take a look at this whole portfolio of APIs that we have here, is that we weren't just coming to the table and saying, hey, let's build an API out of the blue, right? We were actually doing this in a way to respond to the things that the company was focusing on and thinking about, and again, especially as these spaces were going through a lot of transformation. But I think that actually planning out how to productize a service as an external API has helped us really get very good at building our APIs to be really flexible and scalable, not just for external, but for internal use as well. And what's really great is that our API team, both on the product and engineering side, has gotten really, really good at kind of encouraging our developer community within Walgreens to think about this approach and make things very developer friendly from the beginning, even if we aren't originally intending it to surface it outside of the organization. So just as an example, we had a vendor who's responsible for replenishing water coolers in our store locations, and they wanted to use our store locating service that we were using internally. And using Apogee, we were actually able to open that up to them very quickly and easily to accomplish that goal. And so just one final comment that I want to make with respect to this whole portfolio is that on top of just sort of building the roadmap and the features and building out these capabilities, we're constantly focusing on how we can make it more developer friendly, and how, as you mentioned before, how important it is to make that onboarding process as smooth as possible, because we know we have a lot of value here that we can offer to developer partners, and we just don't want there to be any obstacles to them for getting on board. So just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what I think has helped us be successful managing APIs as products. And I know that every organization is a little different. The resources, the structure is a little bit different. But here's kind of some of the things that I thought would be applicable more broadly, and kind of what I think makes our API product roadmap a success within Walgreens. So the first piece is that we have a product roadmap. So we manage it just like any other product. We have a backlog, we have a roadmap, we integrate with the digital roadmap planning process that we have across all of our digital product teams And we participate in an event that we do quarterly, which is basically a quarterly digital product roadmap review. And that includes not just the digital product team, but all of our different core business stakeholders across the different businesses, IT partners, marketing partners. And I think that visibility into what we're doing with our API program has driven really great engagement. Secondly, we have a really great developer evangelist who is actually a member of our product team. So he's an engineer and also a product thinking person. And I think that partnership has been really, really critical for us to be able to not only think about the APIs in a product way, but also for him to be aware of kind of what we're bringing out into the market. And beyond that, we have really, really great tools that we use that help us effectively kind of manage the program so we can spend as much time as possible thinking strategically and less about the administrative part of the job.
Right.
So we have our developer portal, which is the entry point for the developer community to come into our API program and to interface with us. Of course, we have Apogee, which allows us to kind of be a really good partner to our developer community. We have a pretty small team, and we have a lot of partners. We have over 300 partners right now, and so Apogee does a great job of making that really seamless and efficient for us to kind of managing, across that large portfolio, and furthermore, for us to get really easy access into sort of the data and analytics around the program. We also have a really great central communication tool that we use. We use Basecamp, so it helps anyone who is interested in sort of following these things, from setup and launch of these capabilities as it goes through different types of tasks, some more technical or less technical than others. It's all in one place, so it makes it really seamless to track that through from beginning to end. And then finally, from a tools perspective, we recently launched more of an informational portal that's less technical than our developer portal. And this is something that we think is going to be helpful both internally and for our developer community to be able to talk in more value-centric language about what this API program really is and the benefits that it can drive.
Yeah, it's connecting more directly with actual value.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so last but definitely not least, we put a big focus on, as you do with any product, defining what success looks like for that product and being able to report out the performance against the key metrics that we've defined from the beginning. And as interest in the program has grown kind of beyond digital product management, we've started actually putting together more business-centric dashboards and sometimes in partnership with our marketing teams as well to really kind of polish this and to be able to very clearly articulate the business value and the success that these programs have and that they can have. So hopefully that helps shed some light on how we manage our API products within Walgreens, and I'm excited to answer a few questions about the program. So thank you for having me, and definitely I would suggest also, if I don't have time to answer all the questions, you can always reach out to our team through our developer portal at developer.walgreens.com.
Thank you, Erin. It's always great to hear your story, because it's great to hear an organization like Walgreens create this platform and then build an ecosystem of participants that are actually adding value to your business, but also incentivizing them to continue to contribute. So it's such a great story. I love sharing it with people. I did mention before we have some resources I wanted to share with you. So we have the Complete Guide to API Products ebook. The link is available on the screen there. So I encourage you to go and look. There's a much sort of deeper dive there into how to build and run API programs as API products. And there's a microsite that's around that as well that's sort of dedicated to additional information. There's some customer stories and blogs there. And of course, developer.walgreens.com to get to Walgreens Developer Portal. So now I'd ask you to please stay tuned for the live Q&A. We're back to that in just less than a minute. So thank you for some of the questions I see rolling in. So I'm showing some of those on the screen. And I'm going to sort of ask questions, and Erin will probably respond for most of them. So first question, Erin, how do you manage the bureaucracy within a large organisation like Walgreens when looking to build new API products and expose additional services?
Yeah, that is definitely a big factor for us. And to me, the key is really always about relationships. So I think that's one thing that product managers are trained to do really well, is to build relationships across different parts of the organization and to actually speak a lot of different languages, so to speak. And it's really important to be able to communicate not just what we're doing, but actually why we're doing it, and really lead with the value proposition and what the benefit is to the organization by doing and what we're unlocking with this given service or capability. And beyond that, I think the team has really done a great job of sort of building subject matter expertise and credibility, and we make sure that we have those trained experts present throughout the process, whether it's trying to get a security approval or some other part of the process, and sort of building that trust with all of our partners really kind of helps us smooth the path forward through some of that bureaucracy that can be in place.
Yeah, of course, and they say that nothing breeds success like success, and you've had such a successful story. But to your point earlier, being able to tie what you've done back to real demonstrated value for the business, that gives you quite a platform internally, right, to go and talk about your success. All right, next question. Were you able to estimate or quantify the assumed benefits of the program of enabling out to external developers prior to going down this path?
Yeah, so it can be really hard to do that because you don't necessarily control all aspects of the market. You can't have a marketing campaign that you plan out necessarily, right? It's much more organic than that. And so what you really have to do is focus kind of on the potential value. And you can kind of have, after you define what success will look like for this API, you can have sort of an addressable market, and you can have a target customer, which actually might be a target developer partner. So you can kind of put that framework loosely in place, but then once you've kind of done that from a potential standpoint, you really just have to focus on building the best product that's most enticing and engaging for the developer, and putting that effort into it so that you're really realizing that potential value that you've established.
Yeah, of course, and you can't plan for innovation, and to your point earlier, there's probably far more innovators outside the organisation than internally. So you've found some people doing interesting things you weren't anticipating, but of course. Being able, we always say to customers, being able to get very, very close to the end user, to the sort of business need, to the developers, and then be able to iterate quickly on how you support them with API products. I think that ability to iterate quickly, you'll find where the value is, and then you can start building on top of that. So the next question, Erin, with the benefit of experience, if you go back to the start of the Walgreens API program, is there anything that you would do differently?
Yeah, so honestly, I mean, I'd say not a lot. And I think you saw in my story that we got really lucky that we actually kind of had a lot of the right pieces in place. And I think we did a lot of the right things from the beginning. And, I understand that not everyone might have that good fortune to have all the right things in place. So I would just suggest for others, while I wouldn't necessarily change to for another company to try to replicate as many of those conditions that I talked about as you can, at least to the extent that you can control it. So, and that being said, I do think that if there was one thing I could do a little bit differently, was maybe engaging a little bit earlier with our digital marketing team about our marketing strategy. I think there's some really unique things here about how you market API programs that I think we've been still working through, which is you really want the benefit of the program, you want the appetite and the engagement for the program, but the brand that's driving it isn't your own brand. And so the considerations are a little bit different. And again, I think we're getting there, but I think if we had started earlier, we may have perfected that dance a little bit better by now.
It certainly sounds like you're fortunate to have great vision for the organization in terms of digital goals, but then also strong leadership, right? Both in your executive level and your director level that are able to execute on the plans. So Erin, how do you communicate the value of APIs to business leadership and to product stakeholders?
Yeah, so I've definitely talked about this throughout the presentation and a little bit earlier, but I think the most important part of this is just speaking the right language. So if you're talking to a marketing person, you're talking about things in terms of customer acquisition, and you bring to the table an actual example with data that shows how you've been able to bring customers into becoming customers that have, through the API program come in and driven broader value for the company. And if you're talking to a P&L owner or a merchant, you're talking about things in terms of EBIT and basket size, right? And how you're driving value for them. And when you're talking to someone on the product team, you're talking about things like, rapid test and learn and outside-in innovation, and kind of how these developer partnerships have made our own products, more effective and better meet the needs of our customers.
Okay, great. I think we did touch on measurements, but I'll ask this question because I think this is from a very practical level. What do you measure in your API program?
Yeah, so we have some kind of standard things that we typically measure, like the number of partners that we have for a given API, or the number of transactions that are kind of standard across all of them. And then, we have some unique things for each that are applicable to that API, like the number of rewards points that have been awarded, the number of coupons that have been redeemed, or the number of prescriptions that have been refilled.
Right, which is great because then you're actually tying the transactions on the API level back to real business activities. And so the question is, how do you tie those back to business benefits? How do you measure developer satisfaction?
Yes, so we have a couple ways that we measure developer satisfaction. So we actually have like a standard developer satisfaction survey that is just like a customer satisfaction survey. And that goes out once a year, and we evaluate the results from that to help build a better program. But beyond that, I think, again, we have this really strong developer evangelist, and he's out there every day having meetings with some of our key developers. And I think we have a really good sense and our finger on the pulse of what our developers want because of those frequent interactions. And almost any significant developer partner in our ecosystem, we're constantly asking them what we can be doing better.
That's such an important function I don't see organizations consider enough. They sort of leave it as an afterthought almost, like who's going to wake up every day and think about how do I make it easier for developers to engage with us and leverage our assets. So it's great that you have that person in place. So Erin, how do you stay close to developers to ensure an outside-in perspective and ensure that your API product design is a strong fit for their needs?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this. I mean, we just have such a close partnership on an ongoing basis with our developers, and I think not just listening to what they're asking for from us, but sort of sharing back to them the things that we're thinking of, and it's really a dialogue. And so, oftentimes we bring certain partners in very, very early into the process, and we've had launch partners come in even when an API is in beta. And I think we just together, we learn so much from each other, and I think that kind of helps us understand the developer needs before we get too far down the pipeline, and that it is meeting their needs and then also meeting our needs.
And do you incentivize developers?
Yes, we do. So we have a few ways that we do that. I think most notably, we actually, for a couple of our APIs, we have a revenue share. So there's an actual, monetary compensation. And I think there's other ways of incentivizing. Again, the Walgreens brand is very valuable. So being able to talk about a partnership with the Walgreens brand is something that is an incentive. And then finally, those sort of indirect incentives where we're enabling a business metric that partner has through the services that they can get through our APIs.
That's awesome. So actually, I think that's probably all the time we have for questions. So we will make sure to answer our questions, separately online, so we see responses there. And we've got Googlers, as I said, that are also answering questions. So I think that kind of wraps us up. I'd like to thank you once again, everyone, for joining into our webinar today, and thank you very much to Erin for joining us and presenting your really amazing Walgreens API product story. And a reminder that we have another webcast again next Tuesday, and we hope you can join us again then. Thank you.